I held her hand as the machines beeped softly around us, a rhythmic reminder of how little time we had left. Margaret, Maggie as I always called her, was barely there anymore. The woman I'd loved for nearly 50 years, the mother of my children, the grandmother of our grandkids, was slipping away. Her skin was papery thin, her fingers cold. I rubbed small circles into her palm, hoping it would bring her some comfort, hoping that maybe she could still feel me. I had been with her since the moment the doctors told us there was nothing more they could do. I watched her grow weaker. By the day, watched as the life we built together was reduced to a hospital bed and quiet murmurs from nurses who knew the inevitable was near. I whispered something to her, something about love, about forever, about how I couldn't imagine a world without her. I told her I'd take care of the kids, that she didn't have to worry. She gave me a weak smile, squeezed my hand with the last bit of strength she had left, and then, with lips barely moving, whispered back, "Forgive me." At the time, I thought, she was just talking about the small things. The fights we had, the nights we went to bed angry, the years we lost to routine and distance. Maybe she felt guilty for not giving me more of herself in those last years, when the sickness made her withdraw, when she stopped letting me touch her like I used to. I didn't question it. I should have. She was gone by morning. The funeral was a blur. People came from everywhere, relatives, friends, people I hadn't seen in years. They hugged me, shook my hand, shared memories of her. They told me how lucky I was to have had a wife like Margaret, how beautiful our life together had been. Daniel, our son, gave a speech that left most of the room in tears. He spoke about his mother like she was a saint, the glue that held us together. Emily, our daughter, was at my side the entire time, gripping my arm like she was afraid I'd fall apart. I went through the motions. I nodded. I thanked people. I let them tell me how strong I was. I wasn't. That first week after the funeral, the house felt empty in a way I wasn't prepared for. I kept expecting to hear her voice, to find her in the kitchen, to see her sitting by the window with a book. Every shadow felt like her presence. Every creak of the floorboards was a ghost of her. I started going through her things, little by little at first. It felt wrong to throw anything away, but the silence was unbearable. I needed something to do, something to keep me from falling into the void she left behind, and that's when I found the letter. It was in her bedside drawer, hidden beneath a stack of old birthday cards. My name was written on the envelope in her delicate handwriting. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper inside. "My love," she had written, "by the time you read this, I will be gone. And I am so sorry for what I'm about to tell you. I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. But I cannot leave this world with this weight on my heart. Please, please try to forgive me." I frowned, my gut twisting. The words felt heavy, suffocating. I kept reading. "I have not been faithful to you." I sucked in a sharp breath. It wasn't just once. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice I made, over and over again. "And our children, they are not yours." My body went rigid. My stomach twisted into something unbearable. I wanted to stop reading. I wanted to burn the letter and pretend I had never seen it, but I couldn't. I kept going. "You are the best man I have ever known, and I never deserved you. I know this will break you, but you deserve the truth. I ask you, if you can find it in your heart, to forgive me, and to love them anyway. Love them anyway." My mind went blank. I sat there staring at the words, my breath coming in shallow gasps. 50 years of love, trust, devotion, turned into a lie with a single letter. My vision blurred. The faces of my children flashed through my mind. Daniel with his steady determination, Emily with her infectious laughter. My children. My not children. I couldn't breathe. I didn't remember how long I sat there, letter trembling in my hands. An hour, maybe more. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to ground myself, trying to push away the overwhelming nausea rising inside me. Had I been a joke to her? Had I been nothing more than a convenient cover for whatever life she was living behind my back? And then something else hit me. If Margaret had written this, if she had kept this secret her whole life, did someone else know? Did my children know? Fresh wave of nausea rolled over me. Daniel and Emily. Had she told them? Had they lived their whole lives knowing that I wasn't their father? Had they pitied me? Pretended? No. No, that couldn't be. I raised them. I was there for every scraped knee, every graduation, every heartbreak. They had loved me. That wasn't a lie. It couldn't be. But I had to know. I had to find out just how deep this lie went. And I was going to start with them. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair in the living room. The letter clenched in. My hands, my mind running in circles. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked, the sound drilling into my skull like a slow, deliberate torture. I kept rereading her words, hoping that maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe it was just some final act of a woman losing herself to sickness, to guilt over something smaller, something that wouldn't unravel my entire life. But I knew better. Morning crept in through the windows, and with it came the suffocating weight of what I had to do. I needed to talk to them. I needed to see their faces when I asked. Emily was first. She lived in town, just a 20-minute drive from my house. I showed up at her door without calling, and the look on her face when she opened it told me everything I needed to know. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "Dad?" she said, trying to force a smile. "What are you doing here?" "Can I come in?" She stepped aside, and I walked past her into the living room. Her house still smelled like cinnamon. Same, as it always had. The walls were lined with pictures, a lifetime of memories frozen behind glass, and there I was, in almost all of them, holding her as a baby, walking her down the aisle, playing with her kids in the backyard. I turned to face her. "Did you know?" Her breath caught. "What? Did you know that I wasn't your father?" The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. "Dad." I held up the letter, shaking now. "She told me. She wrote it down and left it for me to find. She said you weren't mine." Emily's lip quivered. She looked like a child again, caught in a lie. She swallowed hard. "I didn't know for sure, not until right before she died. She told me, but it didn't change anything, Dad. You are my father." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are," her voice cracked. "You raised me. You loved me. That's what matters, not who is he." Emily's mouth snapped shut. I stepped closer. "Who is he?" She shook her head. "Dad, please." "You know, I can see it all over your face. You know exactly who he is. And if you don't tell me, I swear to God, I'll find out myself." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked at me like I was breaking her, like I was the one destroying everything. And maybe I was. Maybe I should have just left it alone. But how? Could I? She inhaled sharply. "His name is Richard." The name hit me like a fist to the gut. Richard. It wasn't familiar. It wasn't a name I had ever heard her say before. But the way she said it, soft, almost reverent, it told me everything I needed to know. "Where is he?" Emily wiped her face. "He still lives in town." Of course he did. I turned for the door. "Dad, wait." I stopped, my back to her. "Please, don't do this. It doesn't matter. We love you. Nothing changes that." I didn't answer, because she was wrong. Everything had changed. Daniel was next. I found him at his office, sitting behind his polished mahogany desk like he hadn't just spent a lifetime lying to me. He didn't look surprised to see me, which meant Emily had called him. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "Dad, I know why you're here." "Then tell me the truth." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He looked so much like Margaret in that moment it made me sick. "Yes." "I knew," he said. "I've known for years." My stomach twisted. "How long?" "I was 16 when she told me." I gripped the back of the chair in front of me, trying to stay upright. 16? And you never said anything?" He clenched his jaw. "What was I supposed to say? Hey, Dad, guess what? Mom's been lying to you our entire lives?" I slammed my fist onto his desk, rattling the pens in their holder. "Yes, that's exactly what you should have said." Daniel shot up from his chair. "And destroy you? Break our entire family apart? You were happy, Dad. You loved us. I couldn't take that away from you." I exhaled sharply. My son, not my son, had been carrying this secret since he was a teenager. looking me in the eyes every day, knowing I wasn't his father, lying to me. I felt like a fool. I turned to leave. Daniel's voice stopped me. "What are you gonna do?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure yet. Richard's house was on the edge of town, a 2-story brick home with a neatly trimmed lawn and a white fence. It looked ordinary, like the home of a man who hadn't spent my entire life taking what was mine. I knocked. A minute passed. Then the door swung open, and I came face to face with him. He was older than me, but not by much. His hair was gray, but his posture was strong. His eyes, God help me, his eyes were Daniel's. Recognition flickered across his face. Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he said, "I was wondering when you'd come." I clenched my fists. "How long?" He sighed. "Since the beginning. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to put my fist through his face, through the years he had stolen from me. Instead, I forced myself to speak. "Tell me everything." Richard hesitated, then pushed the door open wider. "Come in," he said, and I did. Richard led me into his house like we were old friends, like I wasn't standing there ready to tear his world apart. His living room was neat, organized, too perfect. Framed pictures lined the walls, some of just him, others of landscapes, but one caught my eye immediately. It was a family photo. My children, our children, Daniel and Emily standing beside him, smiling, the rage in my chest flared white-hot. "How long?" I asked again, my voice strained. Richard sighed, rubbing his hands together like he was gathering his thoughts. "Your entire marriage." I didn't breathe. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body locked up, the weight of those words pressing down on me like a boulder. Since the very beginning, my voice was hoarse. "Yes." I swallowed, trying to keep myself from lunging at him. "And the kids?" Richard's expression softened. "They've always known me. Margaret made sure of that. She didn't want them to grow up without their real father." I nearly blacked out from the sheer force of the rage that hit me. Their real father? I took a step forward, my fists trembling at my sides. "I raised them. I was there when they took their first steps. I taught them how to ride their bikes. I stayed up with them when they were sick. What the hell were you doing?" Richard didn't flinch. "I was watching from the sidelines. I was in their lives, but from a distance. Margaret wanted it that way." I let out a bitter laugh, sharp and broken. "And you were just okay with that?" His jaw tightened. "Of course not. But it was the only way. She chose you. She loved you." "Loved me?" My voice cracked. "She spent 50 years lying to my face. That's not love, that's cruelty." Richard exhaled heavily. "She loved you in her own way. She told me that. She told me she didn't regret choosing you." A sharp, bitter taste coated my tongue. "Then why did she keep you in her life? Why did she let you be their father behind my back?" Richard hesitated. Then slowly he gestured for me to sit. I didn't want to. I wanted to stand, to loom over him, to make him feel as small as I did in that moment. But my legs were unsteady, my body drained, so I sank into the chair across from him. Richard leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Margaret and I were together before she met you. We were young, stupid, in love. But I wasn't ready to settle down. I left. She met you. And when I came back, she had already chosen her life with you. But we never really let go of each other." My stomach churned. "She loved you," he repeated. "But she couldn't let me go, and I couldn't let her go." I stared at him, trying to make sense of it all, trying to understand how a woman who claimed to love me could do this. "How did this work?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did you meet in secret? Did she sneak away while I was at work?" Richard's expression darkened. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me how it was." He hesitated. "We didn't see each other. Often. A few times a year at most. Sometimes it was planned, sometimes it just happened." I gritted my teeth. "And the kids? How did that happen?" Richard looked away for a moment, as if ashamed. "She didn't mean for it to happen like that. She didn't plan to have my children. But when she got pregnant, she knew. And she couldn't bring herself to tell you. I felt like I was going to be sick. Both of them? My voice wavered. He nodded. I closed my eyes, forcing back the nausea, threatening to consume me. My entire life had been rewritten in an instant. They knew before I did, I whispered. Emily and Daniel. They knew. Richard nodded again. Margaret told them when they were older. She wanted them to know the truth, but she didn't want to take you away from them. She told them to keep it a secret. A secret. A secret that my wife, my not children, my entire life had been built around. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this, I muttered, my head spinning. Richard stood too. I know you hate me, and I don't blame you, but I need you to know I never wanted to take them away from you. I respected you. I stayed away as much as I could. I scoffed. Respect? You call this respect? Richard didn't answer. I turned for the door, but his voice stopped me. For what it's worth, he said quietly. Margaret really did love you. I gritted my teeth. Then she had a hell of a way of showing it. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I passed familiar streets, places that once held memories. The park where I taught Daniel how to throw a football. The school where I dropped Emily off for her first day of kindergarten. The diner where Margaret and I used to go for breakfast on Sundays. Everything felt hollow now. I finally stopped at a gas station. I needed air. I got out, leaned against the car, and let my head fall back against the metal. I had lost everything, or maybe I never really had it to begin with. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at the screen. There were messages from Emily, from Daniel. But I couldn't bring myself to read them. They weren't mine. Not really. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had no idea who I was anymore. I sat in my car outside my house, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The street lights cast long shadows across the pavement, and the house, my house, stood there like a monument to a life I no longer recognized. I had built this place with my own hands. Every inch of it carried memories, some real, some now, poisoned by the truth. The porch where Margaret and I drank coffee on quiet mornings. The living room where Daniel and Emily opened their Christmas presents, their faces lit up with joy. The bedroom where Margaret and I lay side by side for decades, where she whispered to me in the dark, where she swore she loved me. It was all a lie. My hands trembled as I reached for the door handle. I wasn't sure what I was walking into. Stepped inside. The house was quiet, but I could feel it. They were here. Then I heard them. Voices from the living room, low, tense, waiting. I walked in, and there they were. Daniel, Emily, my children. Not my children. Sitting on the couch, their faces pale, their eyes heavy with something I couldn't name. Emily was the first to speak. Dad, I flinched at the word. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking at me like I was some fragile thing, about to shatter. We just want to talk. I let out a hollow laugh. Talk? About what? About how I've been living a lie? About how my wife spent 50 years lying to me? About how my children, the ones I raised, the ones I loved, aren't even mine? Emily winced. Dad, please, it's not. I slammed my fist against the wall. Don't call me that. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Daniel swallowed hard. We didn't mean to hurt you. I let out another laugh, but there was nothing funny about this. Didn't mean to? You knew. You knew for years, and you just let me live in ignorance. You let me believe I had a family. Emily wiped at her eyes. You do? I shook my head. No, I don't. I had a lie. Daniel stood up, stepping toward me. Dad, I backed away. Stop calling me that. I am not your father. His face twisted in pain, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. I loved you, I whispered, my voice breaking. I loved you both more than anything in this world. And none of it was real. Emily sobbed. It was real to us. I turned away, my chest tight, my vision blurred. "I need to go." "Please," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "Don't do this. Don't walk away from us." I looked at them. Two people I had once thought were my greatest legacy, the proof that my life had mattered. And now? Now they were strangers. I walked out the door. I drove without knowing where I was going, just moving, just trying to outrun the weight crushing my chest. The roads blurred together, the lights of the city passing in streaks. My hands were numb against the wheel. My head was empty, and yet it was full of all the things I couldn't stop thinking about. Margaret, Richard, the children, the years. The lie. I pulled into a motel parking lot. I didn't even know why. I just couldn't go home. I checked in, barely registering the clerk's voice. The room was small, sterile, unfamiliar. It didn't matter. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. My fingers brushed against the letter in my pocket, the letter that had started all of this. I pulled it out, unfolded it, read it again. "Please, please try to forgive me." I crumpled it in my fist. Forgive her? Forgive her? She was gone. She had left me with this, left me to drown in it alone. I stood abruptly, pacing. My thoughts were erratic, spinning out of control. What was I supposed to do now? What was I supposed to be? I had spent my entire life as a father, as a husband, as a man who had something worth living for. Now I was nothing. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling through my contacts. My thumb hovered over Daniel's name, then Emily's. For years, they had been my entire world. And now, I hit delete, one name at a time, erasing them, cutting the thread. If I was never their father, then I didn't have to be their ghost. The next morning, I got in my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. The past was dead, and so was the man I used to be.